Hey, what's going on, everyone? I'm excited to share with you one of the most positive people at LinkedIn and one of my teammates, Andre Whiteleather, who is currently an account executive within the LinkedIn Learning division. And yeah, really excited to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Davidson. I think this is the first podcast I have been in before.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I'm sure there'll be many, many more. You're a good
I
guy. I'm
hope.
sure a lot of people would love to learn from you.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, so I think what really is I was reading some of your LinkedIn recommendations from Elisa and Danielle and a lot of the folks from your former team and yeah, it seems like you're very positive and I feel like you've always like have you been positive your whole life? Like why do you think you're, let's just say, more cheery than the average person?
Yeah, definitely something that I hadn't thought a lot about, like my whole life. I always have thought of myself as a positive person, but it's just kind of the way I've always been. But reflecting and like thinking back, it has just always been, and people have noticed that about me, like my teammates on sports teams, like always growing up, into college, my friends always kind of giving me a hard time of being just always the optimist of the friend group. And even going into post college, same thing, just always being very positive. And I think for me it makes life better when you have that positive outlook, just for the
Yeah.
fact that um, there's so much to be thankful for to result in like being a positive type person. So definitely have always had that mindset, and maybe I wasn't always thinking about it, but I feel like it's just allowed me to live a better life if I'm always just being positive and looking at the bright side. Because regardless of the situation, even if it's tough, there's usually some silver linings. So even if it's not going the way I'd like, there's a lot of different silver linings to look at. So that's kind of my outlook on positivity and for myself.
I'm curious, and this might be like a pretty deep question, but I would like to think of myself as like someone who's positive as well, right? But do you
Percent.
find that sometimes like it's harder to kind of be with like negative emotions per se? Like I guess for me, leveraging the Lyra resource that we have, I have problems even acknowledging that, but sometimes because I'm hiding it,
Mm-hmm.
there's like a lack of, sometimes like I'm like, oh, I don't want to deal with it. Like I'd rather not look at that. But sometimes it is helpful to kind of like be in those situations as well.
Yeah, no, definitely agree. There's obviously times, I think anyone, even no matter how positive a person, you have your days or times where you may feel a little bit more pessimistic or even just kind of drained out from being so positive. I know I've had that
Yeah.
before where typically you're releasing a lot of energy when you are being positive and giving that out. But that for me gives a lot of energy back, just
Mhm.
because when you're spreading positivity and working with other people, when they appreciate it, they typically send it back your way. So
Yeah.
I think that is the kind of like the win-win to it. I think for myself, and like any negativity, definitely not opposed to it. I think there's times to, grieve, or times to, reflect on something that maybe didn't go your way, but life goes on. Like the only constant is change. So just always trying to like do my best to like accept whatever that um, you know thing is that happened, or that change,
Mhm.
and move on and look ahead.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. And what's interesting? I feel like there's not a lot of people I know that intentionally are like, I'm gonna be in sales, right? But it just looking at your pedigree and like where you came from, like you were very intentional about like pursuing a career in sales, right?
Yeah,
So what influenced you to want to know at such an early age?
definitely. So I think, in high school, I remember I took Latin. I was trying to prepare for maybe if I ever went into like the medical field or medical school, but I didn't really know like what I wanted to do. And as I got more through school and thought about college, I realized I wasn't really interested in like the medical field. And my mom, my older brother, my older sister, we're all in sales, very successful. Like, it has its days. I saw that as well, but I they all, had a good life, and
Mhm.
were really good at what they did. And I loved that. And like, reflecting on myself, I had a lot of those characteristics of being able to work with all different types of people. And like, then
Uh,
when I kind of looked at things I was good at, like even just thinking about high school, like I was on the yearbook staff, and like I was the go-to to sell all of our ad space for the yearbook. And like, I
yeah.
realized, like, without even knowing, like I was kind of always like the sales
Uh,
type person, just because I loved working with all different types of people, having interactions.
hmm.
So that's where then when I went to college, I was studying business at Ohio University. Go Bobcats. And they have a sales program there. And that was, my brother
Mhm.
was actually in that as well. And that's kind of where then I kickstarted. Like, I had sales internships, was taking
Mhm.
professional sales courses like at my university, and was like, all right,
Mhm.
this is like pretty cool. It's there's a fun thrill to it. I'd gotten some internships and got a taste of like actual B2B sales, and was
Yeah.
like, all right, this is pretty awesome. Like, I'm down for this. And then, like, thankfully found LinkedIn through a mentor that's still at LinkedIn,
Mhm.
and went through the interview process and did, kind of all of the stepping stones to the role I'm in now. And have, yeah, absolutely loved it. And plan to stay in sales, going ahead.
That's awesome. That makes a lot of sense now if your family, a lot of your family's in sales, because I think in order to be successful in sales long term, you have to have a positive mindset, or
Totally.
else, you wouldn't last.
Yeah,
So that makes a lot of sense. I think growing up with that, you're kind of infused and you see like, okay, like there's a lot of positivity in my life, and having those role models like really helps you like, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
totally. And I think even growing up, like, maybe I didn't think like, oh, this is, what my mom does or what my older siblings do. Like, I knew what they did, but then, like, without even realizing, um, you're just like kind of going on a similar path. So it wasn't even that intentional, but then it's just like, when you're around, I think, that type of people, or you kind of become the person that you surround yourself with a lot of times. So
Yeah.
I think that just was like a nice, smooth transition. And it wasn't just like the easy way out. It was actually something that I felt I was excited and passionate about, but also that I would be really good at, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, clearly you're really good at it, right? Like you've always crushed the numbers for as long as we've met. I joined back in July of 19. But yeah, man, like you're always crushing it. After reading like all your LinkedIn recommendations, I was like, man, like everything is so true, like it's interesting, right? Because there's a lot of like intangibles that come along with like beyond the numbers, right? I mean, I think they're related in a way, right? But there's a lot of people who, let's just say, crush the numbers, but maybe not, maybe they're very like they don't necessarily give as much, right? But you do both, right? So I feel like that's something else that sets you apart. Like you're definitely someone who is just genuinely kind, like you can tell, like, because sometimes like, for other people to be genuinely happy about other people's success, like is it's different, but you're like genuinely happy for other people's success. I think there's this difference in that.
Yeah. And I, like, am so thankful that I'm at a company that promotes that too. Like, even just
Mhm.
within LinkedIn, having like leadership leverage, like being a part of like your OKRs, and something that you're being looked at every quarter. So
Yeah.
it's something that I like, no matter where I'm at, I want to make sure that is important, because that's just kind of how I am as a person and as a sales rep. Because I definitely thrive more off of like collaboration and like getting ideas from other people. That's the thing with like sales. I'm not creating the wheel here. Like, a lot of the things I'm learning from my teammates, from, mentors, things like that. So I love that, at LinkedIn, that's so promoted and encouraged, because that's ultimately like the best type of sales environment for me to be in, just to be able to learn from other people and be able to share, not just like be a one man wolf pack, and like trying to,
Yeah.
close all the deals yourself, and be the top performer. Like, it feels much better to be a top performer, but also being able to help and learn, from your teammates.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. What advice would you give to people who maybe they think sales is something for them, but they maybe they didn't have that professional sales degree or even ever taken a
Yeah,
professional sales course, but they're like, oh, there that could be something that I'm interested in.
totally. Well, you'll find you definitely don't need to have like a crazy like sales background or in-depth knowledge right out of college to go into sales. I remember in college, like there was a stat, 1 in 2 college graduates go into sales. So, and some of them it may be challenging, not for them, but for a lot of others, they love it and they do really, really well. So, definitely don't be discouraged if you feel, oh, I don't know, like having a quota sounds scary, or this working with all different types of people sounds scary. Like, definitely, if you're interested, go for it. It would be my recommendation. Like, you learn on the job, and I always like am surprised within each role. I typically am a little bit nervous before that next role. Like, will I do well? Do I know how to do
Mm.
it? And then 6 months in, or so some amount of time in, I look back and I'm like, oh wow, like I feel like I know what I'm doing, and it just happens. So you learn on the
Yeah.
job. So kind of my advice would be just to go after it, like get after it, and like just be open to like even just failure, and like just always trying to be learning from your teammates and from others. That would be my advice for sure.
Yeah, that's good advice. And I like what you said about realistically, it does take time to adjust, right? I think so many of us are hard on ourselves, especially the first 6 months where we're like, oh, I just want to learn as much as possible.
Totally.
But realistically, like it does take time, right? With anything new, when you're outside your comfort zone, so kind of giving yourself space that like, hey, even if it takes me 6 months, like I'm going to do what I can to learn as much as possible.
Definitely. And we're always learning, like even being in this role for nearly 2 years now, like I feel like my day to day, but there's still always areas of things that I didn't know, like in my job. So we're always learning, but it is always nice when you get to that point where you feel really confident. But I think at that time you need to challenge yourself again to
Mm.
be looking for the next level then, and not getting like complacent or just comfortable because you feel, especially like in sales, as a salesperson, you typically love being at the top, being the leader. So rather than just getting comfortable, like continue to push yourself so that way you are learning and working towards whatever's next for you.
Yeah, I like that. That growth to know that like it never ends, right? Even like you said, even 2 years into the role, like you're still learning. And I do think many of us we do get comfortable, right? So I do think sales is one of those positions or careers where like you're never truly ever comfortable, right? Because there's always something going on and there's always something else to strive for.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of like salespeople, they're competitive. They always like want to push themselves. So, even once you get to that next level or that next role you're going for, you want to just like crush those numbers or crush, the leadership and leverage. So that way you're, always working towards whatever's next after that.
What are your thoughts on like competition? Like, do you view it like as internal competition, or do you do like both? Like, I guess how do you view like the word competition in general?
Yeah. I think like friendly competitions are awesome, like internal and external. Um, I think for like internally, like amongst our teams, like at LinkedIn, we call it spiffs a lot. And I think those are really fun, help like driving engagement, like both on your activity to like do better in your role, but also just like to get collaboration going amongst your team members. So I think it's really awesome, and enjoy it, as I think a lot of salespeople do, especially if there's some sort of incentive. Obviously, this incentive usually is making you do better in your role, doing better on the job, but also too, there's something maybe that's incentivizing you as well to work a little bit harder than maybe the daily. And then like externally, just maybe thinking about like company to company. I want to always be at an organization or help strive to be at the top. So if you're thinking of, other organizations in your space, like learning, how can we be either a better, rep to our buyers in the market? Like, how can we be better? How can our product be better? So I think that
Hmm.
competition, like externally, that's also great too, because we should all be, driving to be the best, to provide the best for our customers. So I think external competition is great as well.
I also meant internal, like in like, is it Andre thinking like, oh, I'm gonna like beat all of my goals? I meant like internal,
Oh,
like
okay. I was like a
within
little
to
confused on that
yeah,
part. So
yeah. But actually, I'm glad you said that because it actually does help me make me understand a little bit how you think about helping your clients and stuff like that too. So
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah, in terms of internally, definitely, I would say I'm probably more competitive just with myself than I am
Uh,
with my teammates. Like,
mm,
especially at LinkedIn, like we're not trying to be like, you know, we want everyone to hit their quota. We want everyone to do well. So internally, I'm always just thinking like, okay, I don't want to just hit my quota. I want to have, 130% for the quarter. So it's like a competition with myself. Can I get there? How can I get there? Um, so yeah, I think in terms of like competition, if thinking of like first my teammates versus myself, definitely a lot harder on myself.
uh,
But I think that's a good thing because that's something that I can control,
right.
whereas I can't always control a competition amongst other people.
Yeah. No, I love that. I like what you said about like, do you think it's a common trait amongst like all the top performers that like where do you find that balance where like you have high standards but not being too hard on yourself where like maybe you didn't have like a month where it wasn't like the best month, you
Totally.
know?
Yeah, definitely have had that. And um, I think surrounding myself with like people that are supportive to me, that helps. So if I am being too hard on myself, like having support around me to remind me, like once again, like a lot to be thankful for, like a lot of good things going on, like then just kind of like step back, like it's okay. Like don't be too hard on myself. There's always tomorrow or
Yeah.
like the next month or what have you. Um, so definitely, I don't try to be too hard on myself. And I find that when I am best performing, it's whenever I am more relaxed and,
Mm.
still being competitive with myself, but not holding myself to a unattainable level.
Huh. That's an
If that
interesting
makes
topic.
sense.
Like, well, like how does one know like what's like a big hairy audacious goal and you know what I mean? Like where's that balance between like I'm gonna shoot for the stars and then
Yeah.
like you said, like, but it has to be somewhat realistic.
Yep, like definitely attainable. And I think you go through times like when you start a new role, like there's definitely times where you need to grind harder than others. And
Yeah.
I definitely do that. So there may be times, but like making sure that's not just like my whole life. Like
Mhm.
there's more to life than just work. So making
Yeah.
sure you're taking times for mental health and well-being and going on vacation, uh,
Yeah.
spending time with family and friends, like that's something that you have to take into account. And also like I kind of was sharing earlier, I think those pieces are important in order for you to do really well. Like if you're always so hard on yourself, you're eventually just going to get burnt out and it's
Yeah.
not going to pan out very well.
Yeah, I know our manager KP always says like, you know, you have such a great positive like mindset and like you have like a great resilience. What's like your information diet look like? Like, do you just like not watch the news because like sometimes that's negative, or like do you read a lot of self-development books? Like, what? I'm sure it's more than just one thing, but would love to see how because clearly whatever you're doing is working.
Yeah. I think in terms of like the positivity piece is just like working with as many people as possible, or just like being like always being really open, like understanding people's stories, like where they're at in their lives. I think that's just like motivational just to understand like everyone comes from such different backgrounds and have different stories, and we all have different things to be thankful for. So just creating a lot of different connections, that's one way I just stay very positive. And then having that surrounding has been very helpful. In terms of like material I take in, definitely watch the news. I try not, I know like at the beginning of the pandemic, we would have the news on like for long period of times and we'd start just watching the same thing over and over again. And we were like, all right, we got to turn the news off. So try not to do that. Would say I'm more of like a reader of the New York Times or just like morning. I subscribe to a few different like reading material like that I get every morning that I read like when I am up and like spend probably the first like 20 or so minutes just like reading more about what's going on in the world. And um I would say that's kind of my like experience. And I think you have to kind of put a limit of in terms of just like news, just because like you said, there can be like a lot of negativity, but there are a lot of positive stories out there too. So it's just about like looking at the right, what you want to look at. But obviously I wouldn't encourage anyone just to look at things you want to look at, because you need to be realistic with, what's going on out there, but having kind of that balance of all measures is important.
Yeah, and I mean you have it's a pretty beautiful background. Looks like you're in Hawaii right now, right?
Yeah. So I've been here for going on 3 months. So I had to
It's
think
been
about it
three
flying
months
by.
already.
Yeah, right. It's flown by. So
Crazy.
got here at the beginning of December. We're planning to come just for a month, but with San Francisco being shut down and Maui being this beautiful, we've continuously pushed out our trip. So
Huh.
we'll see when we come back. But we're planning on coming back at the end of this month, end of February. So
Okay.
it has been a really nice breath of fresh air, though, just being on the island and warm weather and fresh air.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Yeah, I mean, dude, you're living the dream, like crushing it at work, like, you're working out of a place where people dream of vacationing. Like it's a pretty awesome life. Do you have any like recommendations for people that maybe like typically they are positive, but maybe they're in the pandemic, they're feeling a little bit down or they're not feeling their usual selves?
Definitely. I think like positivity, like I was sharing a little earlier, it's if you're positive, you're going to be releasing that positive energy and ultimately it comes back to you from the people that are around you. But
Hmm.
I do think that there are times where, something tough may happen. You may lose a family member or your job or, something that seems really serious, that is really serious. And I think it's okay to like step back, reflect, to like take your time. Like you don't always have to be, that chipper, happy go lucky person. Like things happen. Um,
Yeah.
but I think just for, this challenging time that a lot of people are going through this past year, like trying to just remind yourself of the positives or a lot of things to be thankful for, just to help you get
Mhm.
yourself back on your feet and try to find those moments to bring some more drive back to yourself to be able to, continue running.
I'm curious, like when you think like your gratitude exercise, are you writing it down? Or are you saying it in your head? Like, or I guess I'm curious as to um,
Yeah,
yeah, like what that process looks like.
totally. I have quite a few friends and people that I'm connected to that have talked about like journaling and things like that. And I have done it, but to be honest, I don't do it every day. But I think that's like a really good goal. Like anyone that does do it regularly or like kind of religiously for a long period of time, like they have found it to be really, really helpful. For myself, it's more of just like thinking in my head,
Oh,
like typically like in the evenings. Um,
oh, okay.
but I have written down before, but I would be lying if I said I do that daily because I definitely don't. But
Mm,
um, I think it's a really good practice. I mean, if you
yeah.
chat with people that do it, they um, find a lot of benefits to it. And even the times I have done it, I've always really enjoyed like that exercise.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's like a right or wrong, but it is interesting that you said you do it at night because
Yeah.
some people do it in the mornings. So is it for you? It's like, all right, what do I appreciate about today? Like what went well today? And then you kind of give yourself like a pat on the back.
Yeah. Yeah, I think either works, but for me, I like it in the evening, just like reflecting on the days past, and then also just prepping for the day ahead.
Mm,
Thinking like what all I have to be thankful for, what I'm excited about,
mm.
what went well, and then also just like thinking about the day ahead. So that way, when I do wake up, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
So obviously, can think about it in the morning too, but for me, I like to kind of feel very prepared when I wake up. I kind of know what I'm going to be doing, and I can kind
Mm.
of just get after it in the morning. Definitely do enjoy reflecting in the morning as well, but I feel I am more of like a let's get going type of person in the morning. So that's usually
Yeah.
how it pans out for me.
No, that's awesome. I love these practices. Yeah, I'm going through Tony Robbins' mastermind right now, and your practice of what am I excited about, what am I grateful about from the days, like you're doing everything that Tony Robbins essentially is like the framework that he's giving us. So that's great that you already do that. I feel like I'm like just peppering you with a lot of questions. I guess like um, any questions or any topics of conversation that like what do you think is something that people don't know about you that they should know about you?
Hmm, good question. I feel like a lot of people that know me like already know me. um, but I think like maybe like one interesting thing like for me was that I'm from Ohio and like now I am living on Maui. Like that for me, that's kind of surreal and definitely would have thought this like a year and a couple months ago, I'd never been to Hawaii before. And now, like, fast forward last summer, I lived here for 2 months, and now I'm here for almost 3 months. So I think definitely just being open. Like for me, I'm very like fortunate. My girlfriend's from Hawaii,
Mhm.
so that makes it a little bit easier. But just like being open to um, like change, and that would be kind of like my recommendation. And what I think is interesting about myself is like growing up, a lot of my family lives in Ohio. Like thought it would be cool to like live outside of the state, but it helped me kind of once being open to it. Like I moved to San
Mhm.
Francisco and I knew a few people, um, but I was open to being uncomfortable, and then ended up like thriving and like learning a lot, just maybe about myself, about job opportunities that wouldn't have been possible like where I'm from. So I think
Mhm.
that's something that I think is interesting about myself, but also what I would encourage anyone that is listening, like um, regardless of maybe where you're from, or if you're nervous about something, like just be open to other opportunities, and don't have like your blinders on, thinking, oh, like this is where I live now and this is kind of the only opportunities I have.
Yeah, I like that. Like you said, being open mind, like just open to new experiences, open to things, just just literally opens up so much for you, right? It's a simple concept, but it's I think in theory it makes sense, but in practice sometimes it is harder, right? Just like
Totally.
being open to change, and like you said, change is the only constant.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good quote. Cool, Andre. Well, no, I appreciate you sharing with us. Like, I think many of us are curious to, what makes someone's like so positive and chipper all the time, and someone who's always so supportive. I think it was helpful to kind of share like some of your practices in terms of gratitude and appreciation, and how you plan ahead of the for the next day, and just sort of just your mental frameworks like clearly makes a lot of sense. Like it's clearly working. And it's cool, right? I think a lot of us can learn, no matter if you're in sales or not, like a lot from a lot of the practices that you shared. So
Totally.
appreciate you taking the time and making the effort to share with everyone.
Yeah. Well, thanks for, doing these, Davidson, and kind of to iterate, as probably everyone that, maybe listening knows Davidson, like I think that a lot of those, characteristics you were mentioning, you definitely convey yourself, like being a go-getter. Like I feel like you always have like a million things you're doing, but like you're still like going all in. It's not like you're just like kind of dipping into all these different things, whether it's writing a book or doing interviews or doing well in your job. So I think that you should do a podcast as well, like maybe even on this topic, just for you to share what you do to stay so positive, and how you can be a go-getter and dive into all these different areas and still do it well.
Yeah, thanks, Andre. Yeah, I do think a lot of the like your practice of gratitude is something that really resonates with me. I do think I try to like in the morning I try to think like, okay, like what am I like happy about? Like what happened this week that I'm grateful for, whether it's like, KP's compassion as a manager, or oh, I have like such positive teammates that, ping me, say like, oh, congrats on the book and stuff like that. Like it's just cool. So I do think we do share like a lot of the same practices when it comes to mentality, like specific around, just trying to, like you said, I like what you said about when you surround yourself with positive people and you're always giving that, like, you're always like, oh, thank you for your help, or you're always complimenting others, like people, that energy amplifies, and you feed off of each other, which just makes you like really pumped.
Yeah,
That definitely resonated with me.
totally.
Cool, Andre. Well, thank you so much for your time, and yeah, looking forward to have many more of these chats.
Thanks, Davidson. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Cheers.